Hi, I'm William Saunders. I'm the director of the program on human rights at the Institute for Human Ecology. And we're going to talk tonight with Mary Claire Kendall about her book, Hemingway's Faith. A really good book. I enjoyed reading it. So welcome, Mary Claire.
Well, thank you, Bill. I really appreciate this opportunity to talk about Hemingway and Hemingway's faith.
Yeah, I think the whole idea will capture our viewers because I don't think the common perception is that he was a religious person or had a faith. The picture on the cover has a Hemingway, I guess, in a bedroom. It looks like he's reading a letter, and up on the wall is a crucifix. So I thought just before we get into that, I'm sure people listening, they must have some interest in Hemingway, so they must have some sense of his writing. But he won the Nobel Prize for Literature in 1954.
Mm-hmm.
He wrote some unforgettable classics, and the Nobel Prize Committee cited The Old Man and the Sea. I remember the first book of Hemingway's that I read was The Sun Also Rises, which I read it in college, and it's still one of my 20 favorite books. I found it a very powerful book. And Hemingway is known as somebody who was just the most careful craftsman. I think one time he said his whole ambition was to write one good sentence, something.
One true sentence.
One true sentence. And I remember when I was in college, Hemingway is kind of caricatured as little short, kind of blunt sentences with kind of short, blunt words. But the professor in the class read one of the sentences from The Sun Also Rises. I mean, it must, I don't know, it must have been 3, 4, 5 lines, but it was that kind of prose, and it was a beautiful sentence. So anyway, I just want the people listening to realize this was one of the great writers, one of the great American writers, I don't know, the last 100 years. But I venture to say most people wouldn't think of him as being a man of faith or more. So,
and the big thing about Hemingway is the iceberg theory, and the iceberg underlying Hemingway was his spirituality. That's what his sister Sonny, Madeline, who's known as Sonny, said, and actually the gentleman who introduced me to Hemingway's faith was good friends of Sonny, and so he had that personal insight. He came from a very religious family. It was Protestant.
yeah.
And then he just
in the Midwest.
In the Midwest, yes, excuse me, Oak Park, but it was his parents had a lot of human virtue, but the marriage definitely had problems, and his father was a hardworking obstetrician, but had a sort of a nervous disorder, and it's kind of in the Hemingway genetic map. I don't want to get too in depth. But he discovered the riches of Catholicism when he got to Europe as an ambulance driver there as a teen in 1918. It just blew him away. He wasn't expecting it. But the Farewell to Arms, that's the second novel he wrote, and that's really, I think, mirrors his experience in World War I, The Priest.
Yeah, it's a very famous novel. If you haven't read it, you should read it. I mean, I think kind of a good side effect of this is I hope everybody goes out and reads some of these Hemingway novels again, but it's the one about the ambulance driver.
Yeah. Oh, yeah. A Farewell to Arms.
Yeah.
Yeah, and his good friend Gary Cooper, who would become a good friend in 1940, he was starred in the Hollywood production of Farewell to Arms. See, Hemingway came into his own right at the time when silent pictures were becoming when the movie industry was blossoming. And so he was very blessed that way.
It's interesting, again, for some of you folks, I hope you know who Gary Cooper was. He was a very, very famous American actor. He was kind of the quintessential American actor. I mean, if you see older films, he is the one that they picked to be the embodiment, of an American. And he also converted to Catholicism.
Yes.
and the what is it? The preface to the book
The
is
forward.
by his
Daughter
his daughter.
Maria Cooper Janis, who's a good friend. She, yeah, I got to know. You wanted to weave in my other writing. I got to know her through A.C. Lyles, who I reached out to when I first started writing the stories of the Hollywood legends. Betty Hutton.
Yeah, this is another thing
first.
I want to mention it so we don't forget it. So, I mean, Hemingway is not the only kind of celebrity that you've written about.
Right. That's just so. So the first one was Betty Hutton, who was the template for healing through faith, kind of the conversion stories where they hit rock bottom. And Betty Hutton was the template because she really hit rock bottom. Nobody really knows her, but she was the Annie Get Your Gun star. And so yeah, A.C. Lyles, he introduced me to, A.C. Lyles was a Hollywood institution. He was Ronald Reagan's best friend. They were there out at Paramount together, but he became a good friend. And when he was at Betty Hutton's funeral, it was so poignant because he said, in Hollywood, we deal with the ephemeral. I mean, it's located it was obsession is what he said, dictates it. But you, the priest who brought Betty Hutton to God, you deal in eternity. And
Yeah.
it's just so powerful coming from a Hollywood insider.
I think it's interesting because you've written a collection of stories.
Yes.
And I think for the people, again, listening, I mean, I have that book and I've read that book and it opened my eyes on a number of people. I had no idea about their faith journey and stuff. What is the name of that book?
I did too. The first one was a dozen. It was called Oasis: Conversion Stories of Hollywood Legends. Alfred Hitchcock. He was actually a cradle Catholic, but all the other stories were of converts. Celebrities who, Bob Hope, John Wayne. Ann Southern, Patricia Neal, Lana Turner became a Catholic when she was 9. Mary Astor, just amazing.
Yeah, and so people, if you're fans of classic movies, you'll find Mary Astor in The Maltese Falcon.
Yes.
And so that's anyway.
And she had just converted to Catholicism. And then I've written another. When I went on the interviews, I said I'm going to write another collection of stories. So I did a sequel of sorts. Barrymore,
Yeah,
Cagney, Tracy.
yeah. I think so.
Guinness.
I think for everybody watching again, I think this is a great thing you're doing because you're reminding us about. We tend this day and age don't think of. We've forgotten the stories we knew, and a lot of them we don't know about these kind of icons of culture and Hollywood and stuff that became Catholics or at least people of faith.
Mm-hmm.
I think it's good to know.
Oh yeah, one point I was gonna make tonight. What's really, especially with Hemingway, but even but these stars. I mean, because they are great icons, great in the American pantheon, and so it's amazing to see. They're just human like everybody else. They hit rock bottom and found healing through faith and the Catholic faith. Now, I included Jimmy Stewart in the second collection. Our mutual friend, Father C. John, said that he had a Catholic heart, but yeah, it's really moving. But with Hemingway, I was going to say though, Hemingway was so intelligent, and to think that he saw that the Catholic faith was it, and what did it for him were the apparitions.
Yeah, see, this is interesting. Maybe we just. Yeah, well, why don't you tell that story? I mean, it's interesting how people come to faith and to the faith. So how did Hemingway do it?
Well, Hemingway, he was when he got to Italy, he discovered the richness of Catholicism. He just did, and it was just beautiful. It's the medieval, it was a medieval religion. The first book I'm getting ahead of myself. So he was made friends with this priest, Father Don Giuseppe Bianchi, in the mess hall. And then he was anxious to see action because had a reporter's heart. So he went up on the front, and then he was terribly wounded on July 8th, 1918. He almost died. And then the priest that came by when he was at the Smith, whatever you call it, an Italian word for where they wait to be transported, was this priest, and he anointed him and he gave him the viaticum. And this is the foremost scholar of Hemingway's Catholicism, H.R. Stoneback, said it would have been viaticum. It would have been Holy Communion. It would have been, after that, Hemingway considered himself a Catholic, and he went to church, and you have to believe, and I'll get to the apparitions, you have to believe, though, that he was receiving spiritual direction from this priest, and the priest would have talked to him about Fatima, because Fatima had just occurred. And no, it's very powerful. And for Hemingway, but when he was waiting for to be anointed, he was praying with almost tribal faith to Our Lady and to the saints. So that sealed the deal. Mary, I think, was throughout his life, but that in that instance, and yeah. So he drifted. When he got back to the States, he drifted. But anyway, I'm getting ahead of the story.
Yeah. I mean, it's interesting that. So again, everybody listening, I know we probably have some younger people. Maybe you haven't heard, but the Miracle of the Sun.
The Miracle of the Sun, October 13th, 1917, is it's. So it was from May 13th, Our Lady of Fatima appeared to these three peasant children in the Covidaria in Fatima, Portugal. It was, at the height of World War I and communism, and she spoke about the communist threat in Russia in her third apparition, and then she said that she would give them a sign, because these children were under great pressure from the authorities. Portugal was communist then, to stay away. Give us a sign. And it was the Miracle of the Sun. It was just everybody was drenched. It was raining, and the sun came down and just dried people's clothing, and it was truly miraculous.
Yeah. So, but Hemingway.
It was right. So May 13th. So October 13th, 1917, and then Hemingway comes over to Europe in May of 1918. And then met this John Giuseppe Bianchi. It was on everybody's mind what had happened in Fatima. And so then he would have undoubtedly, I don't have a record, I don't have a letter, I don't have anything, but except his friend George Herder said that we met in Paris in the 20s, said that the apparitions were for Hemingway. He thought that was it. He didn't understand why the church didn't make a bigger deal, because people hearing Miracle of the Sun would be like, knock their socks off. Mm-hmm. So so Hemingway, that was for him. And he was there's a lot of intricate stuff too. There's with Our Lady of Pilar, his boat was the Pilar, and St. James was who Mary appeared to St. James in 40 AD, because he was in Spain and he was very depressed. And but the St. James, Santiago, and the sun also rises. James is huge, and the pilgrimage is huge in Hemingway's life. I hope I'm not packing too much in, but the Santiago de Compostela. Santiago de Compostela, that's where St. James' remains were taken from Jerusalem, to the legend has it, angels transported his remains, if you can believe it, to that site where his the big cathedral. It's the end of that pilgrimage.
Yes, it was the most important pilgrimage site in the Middle Ages, because you could not get to the Holy Land. So Santiago, St. James of the, I think Compostela means field of stars. Mm-hmm. And so this was an important name to Hemingway, and the man in The Old Man in the Sea was named that.
He called the Santiago de Compostela his home office. He was very big on pilgrimage. After he was almost killed, the terrible plane accidents in 1954, and all the churches, St. Mary of Burgos, and haltingly climbed the stairs and just was in so much pain. I mean, that was really the beginning of the end. And so he didn't tout his religion. He was very quiet, but fervent. He was Herder said after he died by his own hand that he was a very devout Catholic. Mm-hmm. But toward the end, his priest died, and he was very devoted. He loved St. Teresa of Avila, and as I like to say, St. Teresa of Avila said, if yourself is your spiritual director, you have a fool for a spiritual director. So Hemingway had a fool for a spiritual director. He was admittedly, he called himself a dumb Catholic. So but he had a great heart. He really did. But he had the Hemingway curse, all the DNA.
Just say it, because I think most people listening would think, be surprised, and part of the reason they'd be surprised is two things: that Hemingway was a bon vivant womanizer, and second, that he committed suicide.
Right. Well, as Orson Welles said, the Hemingway that took his own life, that was not the Hemingway we know. He was terribly mentally ill. It was in 47, that was, well, okay. So so he was not that old, but that's when he had just a lot of tragedy started to hit. His son Patrick was in a car accident, had I think he had some sort of a psychotic episode. He took care of him. It was a lot of stress getting him so that he wasn't maimed for life. And then after that, in that August, he started hearing like ringing in his ears. He started having high blood pressure. Of course, he lived large. You know, at that time they drinking. A man being able to drink and hold his alcohol, that was a sign of a man. It was just part of the cultural thing, but it took its toll, and then he started having the medications, which then you'd have one medication, the hypertension, then cause depression, and so he just was a mess. It was not, I don't think it was really, it was not helpful to Hemingway, because he was so sensitive as a writer, and then he had the Hemingway DNA. He had the hemochromatosis, which is too much iron in the blood. Really, all they needed to do was let the blood, and they gave him this horrible electroshock therapy that really finished him off.
You said about the plane crash. Why don't you?
Oh yeah, so that was so it was a trip to Africa. It was after he had written, at the end of The Old Man in the Sea, he talks about how the old man is getting restless for the lions. So he's telegraphing that. So it was a wonderful trip. There's a wonderful picture, Look magazine, when he's there in Kenya. I don't know if I can, anyway, get the book so you can see it.
Is this when he wrote The Green Hills of Africa?
No, that was in 1935, but it's a wonder. Here it is right here. That's wonderful. I guess we can't really show the picture. I love that. That's before the plane crash. Mm-hmm. And then Mary, his wife, she was a Time Life reporter. She was taking photographs, and they're trying to, they're on the aircraft, and they hit the wires and go down, and then that was the first crash. And then they got another plane de Havilland, and it was a mess. It was a huge crash, and he barely got out of the plane, burst into flames, and liver, everything. Just, he was really terribly injured, and so that was and then if you see him giving his remarks after receiving the Nobel Prize, he talks. It seems like he's talking very slowly, and it just seems like, is that Hemingway? Because he was so injured. Mm-hmm. Yeah, that was really, and at that point he was in such pain, and so then he tried to take the medication, but he was the alcohol was to dull the pain. Yeah. And of course that wasn't helpful in the overall picture. Yeah. So yeah, he just it was and then it was just how his life went. He was the DNA and the large living, and
his perception of himself as a Catholic. I think he said he was a bad Catholic or something.
Well, that's a misquote. So there's a publication. I asked him to change that. Maybe in there was a review, a little. People say that he said he was a bad Catholic. I've never seen that quote. There's in The Sun Also Rises, Jake says, "I wish I wasn't such a rotten Catholic." When he's going up the stairs in Burgos, he said, he says to Ace Hotchner, "I wish I was a better Catholic." But he was in this letter he told this priest who was writing about thanking him for saving the writer, a big Hollywood writer, Don Stewart, I think, saving his life, and he was trying to enlist him to be this Catholic writer, which he never wanted to be because he didn't think he was really up to it. But he didn't really think he was. He always kind of put himself down anyway. But he said, I'm admittedly a dumb Catholic.
Dumb Catholic.
Yeah.
Well, who wouldn't rather be a better Catholic than they are?
Yeah.
So, I mean, it seems like from what you said, you know, he was moved to it. He received kind of the last rites. He believed in the miracles, and he kind of struggled, like many people do, but with it for the rest of his life.
Well, what happened is then when he went to Chicago, when he went home, so he's back, he's all the adrenaline's like was flowing in the war, and he's injured, and then it's, you know, it's the best years of our lives, which I just wrote. I do a bi-monthly column for Alatea, so I just wrote about that. Nervous out of the service. So he gets home, he's getting all this flack from his family, you know, woofing for me to go to college. I don't know what I want to do. And so because he had obviously this whole idea, he had been growing as a writer since high school. So so he leaves, he goes to Chicago and meets Hadley Richardson, who they hit it off, but she wasn't exactly a fan of the Catholic Church. So Hadley was not formed really in Christian faith. Her mother was I don't know what was into spiritualism, and so had a distinct upbringing. So that took him away from his faith. That when they got to Paris, the first book he bought though was Hilaire Belloc's, Paris, which is beautiful, about how the Christianization of Europe, just absolutely gorgeous. So it gives you a clue. He's intellectually just really one with it. He's just really identified with this Mediterranean church. And then his marriage with Hadley, they drink a lot, and it just I think they drink too much, and it was healthy for a good marriage. Hemingway needed somebody to kind of bring him along more.
A little away from the alcohol,
yeah.
rather than into it.
Yeah. So their marriage had issues, and then Pauline comes tripping in, and she's Catholic, and then he falls in love with Pauline. Now, the marriage with Hadley was annulled because she was not baptized. There were definite, causes for the annulment, and people, whether or not they want to accept that, that's the truth. And although they were, involved before the marriage was annulled, and then so then he comes back full tilt into the Catholic Church. And then that marriage, though, had so then wonderful. I mean, she's very literary. She worked for Vogue, and okay, but had trouble with the childbearing, and the doctor said no more children, and that was the thing for Hemingway that was just was really was a tough one. So he didn't have quite the formation and the fortification. Okay, so that's the marriages a little bit. There's more of that, but the thing that for him, Hemingway, was that he really understood the doctrine of actual grace. So he really, I think that was very exciting to him, and so his writing was, and then his writing became his healing, because he did come from as I alluded to, his background. There were a lot of heartache. His father committed suicide. So it's a lot of heartache, and the writing was very healing. Okay, so but then he drifted with Pauline. He did drift, and so he did weaken and it was kind of the perfect storm with the Civil War in Spain, and he detested fascism. So it was kind of like the church was all on the wrong side of the fascism thing. The gosh, how can I tough this out? My wife can't have any more children. So he was a very macho male. I mean, he loved beautiful women. The funny thing is with Gary Cooper, who got all, he was all the women. He was like a catnip for the ladies, and Hemingway was always like, how does he do that? And he wouldn't. So yeah, he did go adrift, and that was when So that marriage ended, and that's when his health problems started really kicking in 19, well, they got married in 45, his fourth wife, Mary Walsh. And, but and then Pauline died in 51. So that meant he could have gotten all his marriage straightened out. He could have, but he didn't feel that he was, worthy but he could have totally gotten it straightened out. But unfortunately, it was not meant to be. It just didn't happen. And with the mental stuff, it just, but he was they did all the practice of the religion, Mary. He was very fervent. As I say, he went to the confession to this priest until 55. And, but no, he didn't wear his religion on his sleeve. And he struggled. He was a struggling.
Like many people.
Yeah.
So I just want to mention for anybody watching or listening, you can send in questions and we'll bring them up and let Mary Claire comment on them. So, I mean, so what got you interested in doing this book, and what surprised you the most when you started doing the book?
Well, because of the first collection of Hollywood legend stories, Gary Cooper's story. He died May 13th, on the 50th anniversary of his death, rather. May 13th. 5 weeks later was the 50th anniversary of Hemingway's death. I was like, Ernest Hemingway, I know they were good friends. I was like, all of a sudden, I just kind of started focusing on Ernest Hemingway, and then I reached out to Charles Scribner.
Tell people who Charles Scribner.
Charles Scribner, the scion of the Scribner publishing family. Scribner published all the greats. Hemingway, of course, Hemingway, Thomas Wolfe, F. Scott Fitzgerald, Faulkner. Yeah. So, Charles Scribner, I was just doing, at this point, I was doing articles, and he basically clued me. He gave me my hook. He said that Hemingway considered himself a Catholic from the time he was anointed on the battlefield. I thought, wow, that's interesting. Really? Hemingway was a Catholic? Nobody knows he was a Catholic.
No, nobody.
And of course, even to this day, they all say he became a Catholic to marry Pauline, and that's false. So I just, I started, and then I started, I just looked at, I saw the arts and entertainment, wrestling with life, and it was one Friday night, and I just kind of felt like Hemingway was, as I said, he was kind of saying it was my turn. Gary Cooper is the one who was the gorgeous star.
Big movie star, yeah, the big movie star.
But it's my turn, so I just really started focusing, and then our friend Father C. John McCloskey introduced me to Red Griffin, who was the good friend of Sonny, and so I just kept chipping away, and I did a proposal. I met Hemingway's son Patrick. Charles introduced me and interviewed him I was writing for Forbes at that point, and interviewed him for an article after they produced this. Hollywood did this film. It was just all the stereotypes. It was just so horrible. I shouldn't say so horrible. It was so inaccurate. Hemingway and Gellhorn, and so I just kept chipping away, and then I wanted to get this book first, and then the publisher I was talking to said, well, first you have to maybe just do a collection, do the Hollywood collections. So that's how that happened.
So it's interesting. Again, people who might have seen those kind of Hollywood bios or something, this gives you the kind of depth that you are missing in those things.
Yeah.
I mean, did it help you understand Hemingway better?
Oh, absolutely. I mean, as I dug in, just to realize that the through line of his faith. I mean, it was in the foundation of his writing, to think that it was all the spiritual. You just find all these spiritual gems, and it was I mean, as you dig in, you say, yeah, there's definitely a story here. There's definitely. I mean, it's real. I mean, people, a lot of Catholics, they doubt it because he killed himself. They take the Hollywood line, hook, line, and sinker, that he was, hedonist. He wasn't very good to women, um, and
Yeah,
but that's
I think it's very interesting because I mean, it's important to understand him and in his personal complexity and all the things you talked about, the suffering he was doing, the genetic aspect of suicide, the fact that he was drinking too much because he would become an alcoholic, and he was taking medicine. So all this kind of stuff, and he had all the injuries and the pain. I think people ought to be a little more sympathetic,
Thank you. I so as I've been trying to climb this uphill battle, yeah, I ran into this gentleman, and he said, I don't like Hemingway, the biographies. I said, read my book and you'll like him, because it's a more sympathetic, and that's what his H.R. Stoneback said, that he was hoping for at the end of the book. He was hoping for more sympathetic, more accurate, more complete picture of Hemingway. I don't, even when you opened up saying he doesn't seem to be a person of religion and Hemingway don't seem to go together. That was the Time magazine, cover in 1950. They just said religion is a topic that he doesn't, or the soul is a topic that he doesn't seem to ever have contemplated. It's so doesn't really capture. It doesn't. They're not really like reading what he's written, and I guess there is that iceberg aspect to it, because this is very important. H.R. Stoneback said that his premier subject was sanctity, and that one that I've mentioned, the short story in The Winner Take Nothing, the gambler, the nun, and the radio. It's this nun. She's urging him to write about Mary, which he'll do with The Old Man and the Sea, and she's also talking about sanctity. He's relaying this nun talking about sanctity, but then in the same short story you have these people who are just like these terrible sinners. So he was very real. He didn't. So.
We got a question here about how does his faith show in his work, and you've just been talking about that. Are there any other comments you want to make along that line?
His faith.
Yeah, his faith.
Well, it would be, because it's fictional. So of course he'd write some nonfiction like Death in the Afternoon. Right. But the faith, it's really, and The Sun Also Rises is rich in Catholicism. Mary is sprinkled throughout, as I mentioned, the gambler, the nun, and the radio, and then of course Old Man and the Sea. It's interesting because the Santiago is like praying all these Hail Marys. He's not much of a person of faith. You think that there probably is some reflection of Hemingway, his own struggles, and but in 1933, Hemingway, in his own life, when he was fishing for marlin, he promised that he'd pray 100 Hail Marys and 100 Our Fathers, exactly the same carbon copy, that he would bring the marlin to Gaff.
As the old man did.
This is Hemingway as the old man did, exactly.
Yeah.
Exactly. I'm sorry, I'm kind of all over the place.
No. I think it's so. I'm not sure I understand this question exactly, but it says, what is the Catholic response to his writings? Is there, I assume that's as varied as anything could be, although I guess you get some people who are Catholic saying he couldn't, do people think that he's, somebody not to be listened to because of his life or something?
Yeah, there's definitely, there's a bit of a prejudice against Hemingway, I guess because he was such a great, people just have a tendency to want to pull down greatness. But he's one of the three greatest writers of the golden age of literature, F. Scott, Faulkner, and Hemingway. He was a writer. He was a fiction writer. So he reflected everything. Just he didn't try and sugarcoat things. He reflected life, the good, as he said, the famous letters to his parents, the beautiful, the ugly, everything. And that was hard for his parents to swallow because that's because they, you know, were very Victorian, and but he felt that was his calling is so I don't know what if there's a Catholic response. I mean, some of his stuff you might say, you might take umbrage, but again, you know, he's reflecting characters that that are real.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, yeah, yeah. Well, anything else that so somebody that's just coming to this new tonight, anything else you would like to tell them to entice them to read this very good book?
Well, read his read, as you say, his literature. Read his literature is so beautiful. He was one of he pioneered the first great literary style of the 20th century. I mean, any writer, I mean, beyond that would have been influenced by Hemingway. So it's just what I have to say is to think, I mean, he was truly a great writer.
Yeah.
And to see that he understood the greatness of Catholicism, I mean, it blows you away. So I would say come at Hemingway with an open mind. If you read this, I think you'll have more of an open mind, more of an understanding of who Hemingway was, where he came from. I say Hemingway's story is the story of America because he came up at the time in high school when, you know, Margaret Sanger was teaching kids the how-to, and that's where things really started to go. The family started to be impacted.
It struck me that he was right at the cusp of a big change, cultural change. I mean, in his time when he was growing up, everybody went to church, right? It was a really, and then things changed.
Yeah, no. So it's huge. It's huge. The cultural impacts with everything with the modern age. It was post World War II. It was the lost generation, the nihilism. So he reflects it, and yet embedded in it is a real is sanctity, is a real search for the spiritual meaning of it all.
Yeah, I mean, I think it's impossible for us to really grasp how big a change that was, to have been brought up in a kind of Victorian kind of way, and then all that change. And he was, at sea in it, not even knowing sometimes he's at sea in it. I mean, it would have been very difficult for anybody, I think. And he found the faith on the battlefield. So quite an interesting, wonderful writer, and this is a wonderful book. And I hope you will read it and learn more about Ernest Hemingway's faith. Hopefully inspire us in our own personal struggles. So thank you, Mary Claire, for being with us.
Bill.
Enjoyed it very much.
Good.
Thank you, and come back again when we do another event for the Institute for Human Ecology. Thank you.